watching Let's Chat.
It's time again for those 5 favorite words of football fans all across the South. It's football time in Tennessee, which means it is time for us to spend a few minutes with the Director of Broadcasting for the Tennessee Vols, this guy right here, Mr. Bob Kesling. Bob, good morning.
Chip, you do that pretty good at football time in Tennessee stuff. That's good.
I've had a little practice, and I have learned from you and some of the best in the business. Wow. Hard to believe, but football time is literally not around the corner. It is here. Vols' first game against Ball State coming up this week. What are your initial thoughts on Ball State against Tennessee?
Well, you know, I think everybody's excited to see Josh Heupel's offense again this year and to see how much they're improved. Last year, you know, Josh Heupel came in and told us this time of the year, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And everybody said, okay, we'll see. Well, then he gets on the field. And the offense set all kinds of records last year. Hendon Hooker was terrific. Cedric Tillman had a breakout year at wide receiver. And now you hope that they can build on that and even be more explosive. Ball State comes in. They're a Mid-American Conference team. They've had some success. They went to a bowl game last year. But they lost a lot of players. They got a brand new quarterback, and we all know how that goes sometimes.
Right.
So Tennessee will be heavily favored. But, you know, you still got to go out and play, and I think that's what Josh Heupel is waiting to see. How are these guys that maybe played some last year, they're going to be counted on a lot more this year, how do they step up and how do they play when the lights come on?
You mentioned a moment ago Hendon Hooker. How important is the development of Hooker in regards to the team's overall success this year? Obviously, a lot of hopes are getting pinned on this young man.
Right, and you've got to have a quarterback these days. I mean, tell me a good football team in college that doesn't have a great quarterback. And Hendon Hooker's done that. You know, Chip, last year, he didn't win the starting job coming out of fall camp. Right. Joe Milton won it fair and square. And then it didn't translate for Joe onto the game field. And then Hendon Hooker got a lot of respect from his teammates because he didn't pout, because he didn't start. He didn't threaten to go in the transfer portal. He didn't do any of that. All he did is go to Josh Heupel and say, what do I have to do to get on the field? Heupel told him. And then when he got his chance, he ran with it. And I think his teammates really respected that, and they kind of rallied around him. And, you know, he only had 3 interceptions all of last year. And as a quarterback, there are 2 things you want to do when the play is over, either score a touchdown or your team still has the ball. And Hendon Hooker did that last year, and that's why he's the starting quarterback. And we expect him to have even a bigger season this year.
As a broadcast pro and one who knows football inside and out in every which way possible, how have you seen, or should I say, where have you seen the biggest growth in the Vols 1 year ago today, or 1 year ago until today, right now? What's been the biggest growth area, in your opinion?
Well, you know, we'll see. I mean, last year they were so explosive. You know, the one thing I respected about Josh Heupel last year, this job didn't seem too big for him. You know, sometimes these SEC jobs really can overwhelm you and swamp you. This didn't do it with Josh Heupel. And the one thing that I was impressed last year, they didn't have one of those clunkers. You know, it seems like every team every year has one of those games where, wow, how did they lose that game, or how do they? But you go back and look at Tennessee last year. They were in every single game. In fact, the Alabama game, the Ole Miss game, the Pittsburgh game, they lost all of them, but they were in the fourth quarter in those games. And I think, Chip, the big step this year is Tennessee's got to figure out how to win those games. And a lot of times you win that with having quality depth. And that's what Tennessee's trying to develop this year.
A lot of folks around here are saying the game on September 10th against Pittsburgh is going to be a really pivotal game for Tennessee. Why do you think that is?
Well, Pittsburgh beat them last year in the fourth quarter, and it's a road game. And while it's nice to play at home, you really learn a lot about your team when you go on the road. We'll see if Tennessee, you know, Pittsburgh is a team, some people have in the top 20 in the country. So that'll be a challenge. But they've got to come up with a new quarterback. So that's always a challenge for Pittsburgh. But I think when you go on the road, you take your team on the road for the first time, you learn a lot. And they'll learn a lot in that second game against Pitt.
We've talked a little bit about offense. I want to shift over to defense here for just a moment. How have you seen the progression of the defensive side of the ball so far this year?
Well, I think that's one of the big keys of this team. They lost three really good players last year. Lante Taylor, who was a lockdown cornerback, Theo Jackson, who's going to make the Tennessee Titans roster, and then Matthew Butler in defensive line. He was the leader of the defense last year. He was playing 80 snaps a game, and that's unheard of for a defensive lineman. So they've got to find three guys that replace those guys, not only the amount of snaps they had last year, but the fact those three guys are all quality leaders on this team. Those guys are hard to find. So there's several people that have to step up. They're hoping Jeremy Banks, who led the team in tackles last year, linebacker, will be able to be one of those guys. They're hoping that Byron Young and Tyler Baton will be able to come up and be those guys, the edge rushers on the end. But they got a bunch of guys on this team that played a lot of football last year, but they weren't the guy. Those guys have to step up this year and be the guy and be leaders on this defense. And there's no doubt that Tennessee's defense has to be better if Tennessee's going to win those games in the fourth quarter like they want to do.
A friend of mine who is a rabid, and I mean rabid, Tennessee fan has been able to kind of maintain contact with the team in the offseason, and he says this is going to be one of the years for the Vols because they are growing together inside out and from the outside in. And when he went into a little more detail on that, it made perfect sense. And from what you're telling me, that sounds like the direction Tennessee's going. Quickly, AD Director Danny White is apparently really taking the wants of the fans into account as he's taken over that position. How does that impact in a positive way what you and the rest of the Vols are doing?
Well, I think he understands the passion of the Tennessee fans. I know he knows the tradition of Tennessee. You know, he worked at Ole Miss for a while, so he saw Tennessee from a distance, and he liked what he saw. They put the VOLS letters back up in the south end zone. Tennessee fans used to love the Vol sign down there, so that's up. They put the new party deck in the north end zone. People in the south end zone for years complained they couldn't see the Jumbotron. Well, now they got a brand new one in the north end zone they can look at. He's got plans to rework the south end zone and the east stands at Neyland Stadium, which desperately need them, new concessions, new restrooms, those things. So he understands the needs of the Tennessee fans, and I think he's blended in really well, and I think he's taken big strides. Look, you know, the baseball stadium,
right.
The plans to redo the baseball stadium and all the other venues here at Tennessee. So, Danny White's been a successful athletic director where he's been before, and he hit the ground running here and has done some really nice things so far.
And it's really cool that his enthusiasm for all things Tennessee permeates throughout all sports, not just football.
Yeah, I think so.
I wish we had more time, but hopefully you'll be able to join us here in a couple of weeks. Make sure and give Coach Heupel and all the rest of the volunteers our big support. All we can say is go Big Orange. And Bob, thank you for your time. You're a class act, and we're glad you are getting better.
Thanks, Chip. I appreciate it. See a lot of folks coming up I-75 on Thursday night from Chattanooga to Tennessee. That'll be great. Thanks, Chip.
You'll see a bunch. Bob Kesling, always a class act and a good friend. Bob, we'll see you Thursday night. We'll hear Bob Thursday night as well. Check out the games locally on KZ106. You can find them on TV on the SEC network as well. Stick around. We have more Let's Chat coming up after this.